Political rivals are coming together, uniting behind former President Donald Trump right here at the RNC. Look no further than on tonight's schedule, former 2024 presidential hopeful Nikki Haley, who has given a slot to speak last minute at the convention here tonight. Joining us now is Chairman of the Republican National Committee, Michael Whatley. Michael, good to see you. Let's talk about Nikki Haley, because Donald Trump said, I'm not going to invite Nikki Haley to come and speak at the convention. And all of a sudden, something changed. Nikki Haley's on the docket tonight to speak. Take me behind the scenes on how that decision was made.
Well, look, I think the president decided that he would like to have her here. She decided that she would like to come. I talked to her earlier today just to say thank you. I think it's an important message for the entire Republican universe that we have her, that we have Governor DeSantis, we have Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, you look at everybody here. This is the Republican universe coming together to celebrate Donald Trump and his nomination.
You know, words are cheap. It takes action. And Donald Trump has talked about wanting to unify the Republican Party, talk about wanting to unify America. And he's taken a step to say, listen, one of my chief rivals, Nikki Haley, I'm going to allow her to speak. This is a party that has had some division. I know them, you know them. There's some never-Trumpers out there. It seems like something different is happening here. There is more unity than we've seen with Donald Trump on the stage, I think, in the last 8 years.
There's more unity here than we've seen in generations. This is the most unified Republican Party that we have had in decades. And I think it is really a reflection on Donald Trump and his agenda. You know, when we look at this election cycle, it really comes down to strength versus weakness. Nobody embodies that strength that we need here in America better than Donald Trump. And it is really awesome to see this lineup of speakers and not just congressmen, not just senators, not just governors and other political candidates, but everyday Americans that are coming together here to talk about the needs for America and how Donald Trump and his agenda is going to help.
I think that's important to mention because, again, Donald Trump, I think, is seen as a president who is fighting for the forgotten men and women of this country. And the forgotten men and women have found themselves on the stage at this RNC giving their message to these delegates. I think it's important in all politics is to make sure you have energy and enthusiasm and volunteers. Have you seen a shift since Friday, and maybe even before, of people who are willing to step up and go, you know what, I'm going to give to this campaign. I'm going to work for this campaign. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. Has that changed?
I think the shift started when Donald Trump cleared the primary back in March. And what we have seen since March is a unification of the Republican Party like we have not seen in a very long time. I think donors are coming on board. I think the grassroots have always been on board. I think party leadership has come on board, and now we're seeing the other candidates come on board. It's fantastic to see. But Donald Trump is not just interested in uniting the Republican Party. He wants to unite America, and I think what we want to do with this convention is spend 4 nights talking about every American family. We want to talk about every American voice, and that's why it was so important to me, and it was so important to the president when we were putting this together to have those everyday Americans from all walks of life, from all across the country, to be here. And you'll notice that they're getting primetime slots. We're not just burying them early in the show. We want them to be heard.
And again, I think that's incredibly impressive. And again, when you see yourself on stage, someone like me on stage, I think that's really incredibly important. I think I've noticed a change in Donald Trump. After the debate, he stayed quiet. Donald Trump doesn't really stay quiet very often. We saw an emotional Donald Trump last night. You noticed the same thing?
I have, absolutely. You know, and I think, look, what happened on Saturday, the attack that we saw, the violence that we saw, I think coming out of that, and the miracle that we saw that Donald Trump is still alive, you know, and we are heartbroken for the families of those who have been affected. But yes, you have to step back. You've got to take stock, and you've got to realize, what are we fighting for? Right. Donald Trump wakes up every single day and wants to fight for the American people. He cares about every American family. And if you look at this convention, this is a 4-day festival to talk about every American and talk about the issues that they care about and how Donald Trump is going to put solutions on the table. He's going to restore our borders. He's going to restore our economy, and he's going to restore our standing in the world.
Solutions that'll work for them. All right, I want to move on to this quickly because President Trump hasn't just unified the Republican Party, he's expanded it. The party now welcoming everyone from Teamster bosses Sean O'Brien to model and entrepreneur Amber Rose. a glaring sign that this isn't just your grandfather's old GOP. The tent really is expanding, and people with very different ideas and views on policies, but all coming together under this Donald Trump Republican tent.
Yeah, this is a political coalition like we've never seen. I mean, obviously, we have seen unions support the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan put that coalition together. But we have seen 20, 30, 40-point swings in youth votes, in black votes, in Hispanic votes, in Asian American votes. And now we're seeing Jewish voters that are coming over too. They're all coming over because Joe Biden's agenda does not work for America. It doesn't work for American families. And Donald Trump is putting solutions on the table to help every American family.
And to be clear, it's not just Joe Biden's agenda. It is the Democrat agenda. No matter who they put at the top of their ticket, that is the agenda of that party. Michael Whatley, thanks for being with us. And congratulations on a remarkable convention. It is, if you're not here, you can't feel it, but it is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.